The Baal Shem Tov lived. He was born in 1700. Actually, it's not so clear. Some date the Baal Shem Tov has been born in 1698. It seems that everyone agrees, from what I can make of the information, that he passed away in 1760. Everyone agrees he passed away, the Baal Shem Tov, in 1760. Was he born in 1698 or 1700? That's a little bit unclear. I'm not sure anyone knows the answer to that, but there seem to be different dates. But that's neither here or there. That's not really that significant. So let's have a look. The Baal Shem Tov was commonly referred to as the Baal Shem Tov. Now, his name was not Baal Shem Tov. That was not his name. His name was not Baal Shem Tov. I have a friend whose name is Shem Tov. That's his name, Shem Tov. But his name was not Baal Shem. His name was not Baal Shem Tov. His name was Rabbi Yisrael ben Eliezer. Rabbi Israel, the son of Eliezer. That was his name. His name was not Baal Shem Tov. He was called the Baal Shem Tov, or sometimes if you take an acronym of Baal Shem Tov is Besht. So the Bet for Baal, the Shin for Shem, which is name, and the Tet for Tov, you write it together, you get Besht. So he's often referred to as the Besht. Or if you want to say, that's how you say the best in Yiddish, the Besht. Okay. All right, so he was the Besht. Okay, so he was commonly referred to as the Besht. And what does the Besht mean? The Besht means the Baal Shem Tov, the owner of a good name. On a simple level, what this means is that he had a good name, but it's a lot more than that. They used to call somebody in those days that performed miracles and wonders a Baal Shem. What does it mean, a Baal Shem? A person bearing a name, having a name. It seems to be a reference to using the name and the Kabbalistic names of God, of Hashem, to perform certain miracles and wonders. That's what it seems to be. So he was called the Baal Shem Tov because he used the name, he was a Baal Shem, he used the name of Hashem to perform miracles and wonders, and the good name, because actually it's very interesting, we say Hashem is described as good. Hodul Hashem ki tov. But I also think he's called the Baal Shem Tov because his nature was one of tremendous kindness, compassion, and goodness. And I think that was the hallmark of the Baal Shem Tov, kindness, compassion, and goodness. So his name was again Rabbi Yisrael ben Eliezer. Now, just in context, before we go to his family background, which I put up here, but just in context, one has to remember that there was huge pogroms. The Khmelnytsky pogroms, which were in 1648, 1649, literally decimated and left much of Jewry in that part of the world in ruins and tatters. It was very, very serious pogroms. People were broken. People were poor, extremely poor. And frankly, there were many, many Jews, especially in the outlying areas, that were not rebellious in any way, but frankly ignorant of Torah values and Torah law. They simply didn't know. And that's the environment, in a certain extent, that's the broader context in which the Baal Shem Tov arrives in the world. Now, it's very interesting, he was an only child. Now, you'll see that in the Hasidic world, and this is part of the beauty and allure of the Hasidic world, some would say that it's off-putting to them in many ways, but you have to get into this mode and phase of thinking to understand the Hasidic world. There's everything in the Hasidic world has a story behind it. Everything in the Hasidic world has a story behind it. And the background of the Baal Shem Tov's parents also has a story behind it, a very interesting story. Now, there are two different, the question is, how did the Baal Shem Tov's parents, his father's name was Eliezer, his mother's name was Sarah, how did they merit to have such a wonderful son? How did they merit to have such a wonderful son? So some say that one time, his father Eliezer, they used to have guests over in the home. And one time there was a guest that didn't observe the Sabbath at all and was, not the best character. And in those days, by the way, it was rare not to observe the Sabbath or something like that. It was rare. So there was a Jew that came, and the Baal Shem Tov's father Eliezer honored this Jew. He did kindness to this Jew. And then some people said, how could you do that? He's not observant, and this, that, and the other. And Eliezer, the father, the Baal Shem Tov was not yet born, but Eliezer, the father, said, I don't care. And he did more for him. And he gave him more respect than anybody else. Now this is very, very important in understanding Hasidic thinking and Hasidic concept. Because the Hasidim try to always bring close people that are distant until this very day. Never distancing people, never pushing people aside. That's one of their tremendous hallmarks, is loving other people and doing whatever they can to bring them close. So it says that that person later on revealed to himself that he was Elijah the prophet, disguised as a person who never kept the Sabbath. And he came to test him, and in that merit he would have a great son, and that son was the Baal Shem Tov. Now, that you can see that many of these things have a very interesting mystical story. There's another story that's brought down in a book, which is a book that actually orders very well, one of the few that orders very well the life and stories concerning the Baal Shem Tov. So in this book it's recorded as follows, a very interesting story. And these stories, of course, were passed down, kind of tradition. So the story goes as follows. There was a pogrom or something in the town. The king came through the town where Eliezer was living with his wife Sarah. And him and his wife were separated. And his wife, he was captured. He became a slave to someone who worked for the king. He became a slave to the officer of the king. And one day, this officer of the king was called in by the king, and he was asked to give the king advice on a particular war effort that he was going to war, and he was asked to give advice to the king. And he said, King, I like you very much, but this is not my level of expertise. I don't know what to tell you. And the king said, go home, what good are you for me? Right? And he thought he was going to lose his job, and he was very depressed. He came home, and he told his servant, his slave, which was the Baal Shem Tov's father, told him what had transpired with the king. So he said, don't worry, I'm going to do something called a Sheilat Chalom. Now, Sheilat Chalom means you ask a question and you get the answer in the dream at night. Okay? So he was going to do a Sheilat Chalom. So he went to sleep and he did this Sheilat Chalom, and it came to him what tactic to do for the war. And he told the king's officer the next morning, and he told the king, and the king said, where did you get that information? There's no ways you could have known that. So he said, well, I told the whole story about Eliezer, his servant, and anyway, Eliezer's servant got elevated to very high position. But so much so that Eliezer was given the king's daughter. It was either the king's daughter or the officer's daughter's hand in marriage. And Eliezer was a Jew, and he didn't want to intermarry, because a Jew's supposed to marry a Jewish person. So he didn't want to intermarry. And the king's, if a person converts, you could marry them, but she didn't want to convert to Judaism. So what's the king going to do? So what's Eliezer going to do? So he stayed away from her. He would never come close to her. There was a marriage ceremony and everything, but he would never come close to her. And she couldn't understand it. And one day, he told her that the reason is because I'm a Jew. And the king sent him, and she got special permission for him to leave. He was free, and he returned to his wife Sarah. But at this stage, they were very old. Some say they were over 100. I don't know. That's the legend. I found it hard to believe, especially in those days. But it's a cute story. But they were beyond childbearing age. It's interesting also that his name was Eliezer. Her name was Sarah. Like Abraham and Sarah also had a child in their old age, right, in the Bible. But anyway, his name was Eliezer. Eliezer was the name of Abraham's trusted servant. Okay. Anyway, so here you had Eliezer with Sarah, and they're old, and they shouldn't be able to have any more children, but they have one child. And that child is the Baal Shem. And by the way, this version of the story says that Elijah the prophet appeared to him and said in the merit that you did not, told him that in the merit that you did not take this, that you weren't with this other woman that you weren't not supposed to be with. In that merit, you're going to have the child who's the Baal Shem Tov, this wonderful life that's going to come to the Jewish people. So that's how the legend goes.